Hey, what's going on, guys? This is the Uprise podcast with your host, Tori Jones, and your prototypical big man, Eric Brandt. Now, we have things set up where we're actually capturing this in one go. That probably won't make any sense to you guys, but the technical stuff we've had to figure out has been combining different cameras and different audio feeds. We're actually recording this as one, so hopefully that makes things easier for us, but also the audio might be a little bit wonky here and there. The camera might be a little bit laggy here and there. We're still testing the setup, so hopefully this works for you guys. Now, we're coming to you on a Tuesday because I wanted to incorporate some Media Day interviews into this podcast. However, the file sources that I was going to use was going to come from the Trailblazers YouTube page, and the audio on those videos is pretty terrible. When you wear headphones, it's a lot worse. It plays in one ear, and then the other ear it's static, and it's really, really, really quiet. So I just decided, you know what? I'm going to watch the Media Day interviews. We might bring a couple things we remember from certain players' interviews into this, but we're not going to include Media Day audio. So that was the whole reason I postponed this to Tuesday, and that was kind of pointless. But we're going to do a player-by-player breakdown. We're going to go through the entire roster and give our thoughts on what we want to see from that player going into next season and what we think their role would be. So that's it for the intro. We're going to keep the intro pretty short, and we're going to hop straight into our first player. We're going to start at the top, and that is Damian Lillard. And since I haven't let Eric talk yet, I'm going to let him take this one away.
And what more do you want from Dame at this point? He's the ultimate leader. He's done everything for this team. Been in the MVP conversation, and the only really thing he can do at this point is keep it going. He's improved every year, so I expect more of the same from last year. He could probably improve his assist numbers a little bit, especially having a couple of bigs to lob to this year. Maybe some more consistent three-point shooting on the wings, and then he could also improve some of his three-point percentage numbers, which you'll probably get into in a second.
Yeah, a couple of goals I have for him next season are to reach past 7 assists per game, because he's always been in between 6 and 7 assists per game. His playmaking has gotten better. He's a lot more in control of the game, and it would be pretty cool to see him average over 7 assists per game. And then I want him to improve his efficiency from the three-point line a little bit as well. I think he has better options on offense. I think Hassan Whiteside will work great as a pick-and-roll big for Dame. I think Collins' offensive game will improve. I think Rodney Hood is the type of small forward on the offensive end that this backcourt has needed for years. So I think Dame won't have to force quite as many tough threes as he forces. Now, he can make them. He can make his 30-footers. Those aren't bad shots for him. I just think that this offense, maybe having more threats on the court with that starting lineup alongside Dame, maybe playing more up-tempo, I think that might help improve his efficiency numbers, both from 2-point range and from 3-point range. So that's something I'm looking for as well. And then he improved a lot defensively last season. I want him to keep building on that. He's approaching being an average defender, which is pretty good considering how bad he was a couple of seasons ago. So I want to see him improve a little bit more defensively so that we can finally call Damian Lillard an above-average defender. But all in all, I'm really impressed with the way he's matured his game, the mastery he has over the offense. He's always in control. He seems to have gotten a lot better at making the right decision on whether or not to shoot or whether or not to pass. So I just want to see him keep building on what he's been doing and how he's been improving the past couple of seasons.
And he talked a lot on Media Day about playing in scrimmages off the ball. And that's the next evolution when we get trapped in the playoffs. You can't just let him bring the ball up the court every time and get trapped. And if he's getting wide open looks and they're being creative with how they're using him off the ball, his percentages will improve and he'll get some looks that he's never gotten before. And plus, it makes the defense a lot harder to focus on him when we get into the playoffs. So it's just nice to have those options. And then the other thing I think is important with him is mentally. I'm not worried about it based on what he said yesterday, but there can be some complacency when you make it as far as you did last year. You go all the way to the Western Conference Finals. You kind of exercise some demons. And definitely him and CJ definitely seemed to have a mindset last year like they weren't going to let what happened in the Pelican series happen again. And it was cool to see them succeed in that. But now it's hopefully not a case where they're like, okay, we got to the Western Conference Finals, we proved ourselves. Like, instead, they need to be like, wow, we made it that far, but we're not satisfied. Let's get further. And we can at least get back to there. We have more talent this year, and we're going to make sure that happens. If they have that mentality, I think Dame will be fine.
Yeah. Now, speaking to both the points you made, the last point you made in terms of them being a little bit complacent, it did seem like they were pretty satisfied with simply making the Western Conference Finals last season. They didn't seem too visibly frustrated over being swept, which I took a little bit of issue with. You know, you can't be too greedy as a Blazer fan. They made their first Western Conference Finals in almost 2 decades, but I also wanted them to be a little bit more frustrated getting to the doorstep of the NBA Finals, leading the majority of the minutes in that series, and yet still getting swept. I would have thought that would have been a really frustrating thing. Hopefully they use that as fuel instead of being like, okay, we made it to the Western Conference Finals. Hopefully we can do better this season. Hopefully they can use their success to motivate them further, because as you said last season, they used their failure against the Pelicans to fuel them throughout the rest of the season. But your first point was they talked about using Dame more off ball during media day, and I believe that was a point of emphasis last preseason. I think they might have talked about it during media day, but what I noticed last preseason is there was a lot more sets where Dame was being used off ball, and for whatever reason, that occurred a lot in the preseason, but then once the season got underway, they strayed away from that. Now, maybe that was a personnel thing. It wasn't really quite working out. Maybe that'll be different this year with a new set of guys cycling into the roster, but I definitely want to see Dame play more off ball because it'll be harder to guard him. When you watch a guy like Steph Curry, he is constantly moving off the ball, and he's getting wide open threes because of it, or he's getting really good looks around the rim, and I hope Dame can kind of replicate that and get the same looks for himself.
Yeah, and against the Pelicans, they pretty much double-teamed him right when he crossed half court. And then last year against the Warriors, they just left Draymond Green in the middle, and he just spied on him the whole time, and he basically had nowhere to go. So if you play him more off the ball, it's a lot harder to do those things. And you don't want to necessarily take the ball out of his hands too much, but you want to design plays where he gets the ball in different situations and not just bringing the ball up the court and getting a pick and going right into what the defense wants you to do so they can just double it easily. And if he does do that, gets comfortable off the ball, and we have capable guys of running the offense, let's say either CJ or Simon steps up, like you mentioned we have Hood now, then it's going to make this whole offense just pretty much unstoppable.
Yeah. I hope that they get Dame in different situations than dominating the ball. I hope they get him looks off the ball. It'll be much harder to guard him, and I think that will help protect our offense from bogging down during media day. They also talked about playing faster, so hopefully that'll help diminish the half-court possessions where it's just kind of pounding the ball around the top of the key while the shot clock winds out. So on to our number 2 player, that is CJ McCollum, and when we're looking for things that he should improve next season, I think the first thing is probably his playmaking.
Yeah, playmaking is definitely something he can improve on. And this is not meant to be a knock on CJ. So he's a great player, and I think we both appreciate everything he brings. And he's on the cusp of hopefully becoming on that fringe all-star level. But there are some things he can definitely improve. And like you said, playmaking is one of them. His assist numbers were pretty much down, and his passing was down across the board last year, and that's something he needs to improve on. I think he could use his dribbling and his ball handling to create for others more, because he sucks in the defense when he gets by his guy and gets into the elbow area. And if he just realizes that he has avenues to pass once he does that, instead of always having to take a tough jump shot, I think he could really improve those passing numbers.
Yeah, and I think beyond passing, what he needs to improve is just simply being an effective player when his shots aren't falling, because we know he can light it up, especially when he gets hot. He's one of the most lethal players in the league, but when his shot isn't falling, he has a hard time making a positive impact because his defense isn't all that great, because his playmaking isn't quite where it should be, in my opinion. He's not a guy that's going to go out there and get a lot of rebounds, so when he's not hitting shots, when shots aren't falling, what is he doing to help the team? And I think that has to be his mindset going into the season, where he's maybe if his shot isn't falling, but he's still in attack mode, and his reputation as a lethal scorer, maybe that draws extra defenders, and if he can start making the right pass more often, maybe that can help other guys get going and help other guys get good shots. And then if he's able to improve his defense a little bit more, then maybe during spurts he could make a positive impact on that end. So CJ, he's always going to be a solid scorer. He could be more efficient. Last season he had a great second half of the season, very efficient. First half of the season, he struggled, so hopefully he can replicate that second half. But all in all, I'm just going to be looking for him to make the right pass a little bit more, much like Dame has improved on, and I'm going to look for him to improve his defense.
Yeah, efficiency is kind of tricky. So he was just a shade over 55% on his true shooting percentage last year, which is pretty average, mediocre. But you think he dominated the playoffs, but you look and it's down around 52%, which is not good at all. So that's one thing. If he got that up into like the 58 to 60% range and maybe got to the free throw line a lot more, he'd be pretty much unstoppable. But then you look at his turnover percentage, and he hardly ever turns the ball over for how often he's trying to break people down and get those highlight crossovers. So it's pretty effective when you get the ball to the hoop, because other things can happen even though you missed a shot, like an offensive rebound, or you can suck the defense in for the next play. But you look at some of those games where he scores like 39 points but took just as many shots to get that amount of points. So if he can just knock that down a little bit and score, say, like 30 points on 22 shots instead of 30 points on 29 shots, it would really improve his efficiency a little bit. I don't know if that's possible to happen, but it would be really good for this offense. And then the other thing is his three-point percentage was down a little bit last year, around 37.5%, after, like you said, a hot second half of the season. If he didn't have that, it was down even lower than that. So if he can get that back up to his career average of closer to 40, then we're going to be really solid.
For sure. Moving on into our third player, it was a guy who was arguably just as good as CJ last year. That's Jusuf Nurkic, and it was good to hear from him during media day. It wasn't quite... there was a lot of attention given to the injury, but it wasn't like how it was right after the injury when everybody's like, oh, how's Nurk doing? Oh, Nurk's on camera. Oh, what's the whole, what's he feeling like? What does he seem like? He must be heartbroken. He must be crestfallen, because those were the questions running through my head when he did his interview about 2-3 weeks after he ended up breaking his leg. I don't quite remember when it was. Maybe it was a little bit longer than that. But he seemed in a lot better spirits during media day than he seemed in previous interviews. Of course, withholding that interview after Dame hit that Game 5 winner where he cursed on TV, okay, because he was awesome. Probably pretty high on some painkillers then. But my whole point is you can definitely tell that he's kind of getting integrated back into being a part of the team. He spent a lot of time away from the team at the end of last season, but now he's around the practice facility. He's around guys. There's pictures of him working out with Pau Gasol that came out a couple days ago. So that's just a good thing to see. But the timeline for his return from injury is reported as non-existent. They don't have a timeline. I think that's a good thing. Instead of him trying to rush back by a date, he's just going to keep plugging away day by day, focusing on each day as it comes. And then once he's ready to go, the doctors will clear him and he'll be ready to go. So I don't know what your thoughts were on that, but
Olshey said they were going to be vague about it all year, but that he they'll let us know when he reaches certain benchmarks.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're just kind of left wondering what that means. So I don't know. It's one of those situations where obviously I don't think they're going to rush him back. I think they're going to take their time, especially if Whiteside and some of the other vets are playing well enough to where it's not a huge deal. I mean, obviously we're going to miss Nurk, but hopefully people can hold it down and we can have a decent record by the time he's ready. Like we talked about in our trade podcast, if he is back by the trade deadline and showing that he's probably going to be fine for the rest of the season, then that brings into play some possible ways to upgrade the roster. But I have a feeling we're not going to see him until about February anyway.
Yeah.
I think they're just going to shelf him even if he's good to go and just not risk anything happening, kind of save him for a playoff run.
Yeah. I'm just hoping that once he does come back, whenever it is, January, February, I hope he gets back to the Nurkic of old, man, because that dude was awesome last season. I think during the regular season, I think he was a better player than CJ McCollum. I mean, his per 36 numbers were amazing. 20 points per game, 15 rebounds, 4 assists per game. His efficiency got better. His free throw shooting got better. He was just a much, much better player. And honestly, the fact that he got no traction for most improved player was absolutely absurd because his advanced metrics especially had a humongous jump, one of the biggest jumps in the league. So I'm just hoping that once he gets back, he can resume his development as a young player. He can pick up where he left off, and he can continue to build off that because, I mean, the dude was just going to keep getting better. He was still only, 24 years old? I believe he turns 25 around this time of year. I don't really remember, but the dude's a young player. The dude was getting better, it seemed like, each month. He was getting better throughout the season. When he got hurt, he was playing maybe his best game of the year against the Brooklyn Nets. He was absolutely killing it. So I just hope that he's able to pick back up where he left off and build on what he did last season. So moving into our fourth player,
real quick. So
yeah.
When we took off last year, it was when we started utilizing him in the high post and using his playmaking ability, and that's the one thing that hopefully we'll get to Pau in a minute, but he's kind of like that too, but we're going to struggle a little bit with in situations where they're keyed in on Dame and CJ because Nurk was taking some pressure off of that with his playmaking ability from the high post, and we're not going to have that for the first part of this year until he's back. But one thing about that is he's not super athletic as a big, so you wonder if hopefully he can come back and it won't really affect his game too much because it's not like he relied on like crazy hops or anything to
we'll go more into depth on that in future podcasts, especially once he reaches certain benchmarks. We'll definitely cover those on these podcasts, but you said we're going to have that lack of playmaking from the center spot, but our fourth guy, Hassan Whiteside, has been saying that he loves to pass and he thinks he can put up a triple-double at some point, which is kind of crazy because the dude has only averaged about 1 to 2 assists per game for his entire career. But he also said, it's a lot easier now because I'm being put in positions where I can make basketball reads, where it's not just pick and roll, and if I get the ball, I just have to dunk it or finish with a lay-in. He said that he likes our offense, he likes Stotts' offense because it puts him in positions where he's not supposed to do one certain thing, where he's not just running pick and roll, where he actually has to make basketball plays and reads, and he enjoys that. He also said that he has a lot of confidence passing out to guys like Dame and CJ, as he should. So with Hassan Whiteside, the first question I got for you is, how much do you think his playmaking will improve in Terry Stotts' offense?
Man, that's a good question. So I'm kind of taking it I'll believe it when I see it approach.
Yeah, agreed.
Like you don't really see a guy who like never passes turn into a good passer. But then again, you have seen several players, Nurk included, Mason Plumlee, players like that, who did become playmakers in Stotts system. So you wonder if he's kind of allowing them to do something that other coaches aren't. And you hear that all the time, especially yesterday media day with like 3-point shooting and playing to the players' strengths and things like that, enabling players to be themselves instead of just conforming to the system. So I really want to believe that he'll just step in and start averaging 3 or 4 assists a game and everything's going to be great. Like I said, I'll kind of believe it when I see it. I'm more excited about him on the defensive end than the offensive end, even though he's not like terrible on offense, but definitely want to see him show that playmaking ability if he has it.
Oh, for sure, man, because this dude is an elite rim protector, elite rebounder. The special thing about Nurkic was he was a pretty good rim protector, pretty good rebounder, but he also provides some playmaking. Usually you don't get all three of those things in a big. So if Hassan Whiteside could do all three of those things, dude would be one of the best centers in the league, because he's already a guy who, in my opinion, if he gets the consistent minutes, if he gets 30 minutes per game, he has a chance to lead the NBA next year in rebounds and blocks. And that's something he noted. Yeah, that's something he noted in his media day interview, where through the first couple of months of Miami, he was leading the league in both blocks and rebounds, and then they started toying with his minutes a little bit. This dude gets over 17 rebounds per 36. He's a shot blocking machine, great rim protector. So that's something that we can easily expect out of him. As you said, the playmaking, we'll see how that looks like, because he hasn't proven it at any point in his career. We did talk a little bit about Hassan Whiteside during our first podcast. If you want to go watch that, go check it out. We talked about how Miami Heat fans call him lazy, which I think is absolute BS. But yeah, go check out that podcast if you want to hear us go in on those Heat fans that, for whatever reason, absolutely hate this guy, even though he kind of got screwed over in Miami. So I'm just really excited to watch Hassan Whiteside, especially next to Zach Collins.
And especially if he has that attitude all year where he has something to prove to all those people. So hopefully he comes in with that mindset. He fits in. I think Dame's the greatest leader in the NBA, so I don't think he's going to stray and do some of the stuff he was trying to get away with in Miami. I think he'll stay engaged, and that's going to be pretty deadly for the rest of the league.
Yeah, he'll have that chip on his shoulder, which I think is basically how this team is built. A lot of guys with chips on their shoulder, small school guys. We added Ken Bazemore, who kind of fits into that. We added Nasir Little with the 25th pick, and coming out of high school, he was a top 5 prospect, so he kind of has that chip on his shoulder that because he slipped so far in the draft. Olshey has always seemed to get guys like a Mario Hezonja, who's the 5th pick in the draft and who everybody calls a bus, myself included at times, but that probably is going to give Mario Hezonja a chip on his shoulder. For the record, I want to see Mario Hezonja succeed, but lots of guys with chips on their shoulder. I think it fits in. I think it helps build such a great culture, and I do expect Hassan Whiteside to play with that chip on his shoulder. Now, his front court running mate for the starting lineup next season is probably going to be Zach Collins, and I don't know if I've ever seen a front court with 2 elite rim protectors. Now, I know some people would say Zach Collins isn't elite yet. He has his foul issues, but he has the potential to be a very elite rim protector at the power forward position. Combine that with Whiteside, I don't even know how teams are going to get layups off.
No, Zach has really good tendencies on defense. Like, he's always in good positions. He needs, like you said, improve when he comes down with his arms so he's not fouling. And he gets illegal screens too often, which lead to I'd rather him get his fouls on defense.
Let me just say this real quick. He gets a lot of ticky-tack stuff called against him that most other bigs don't have to deal with. I feel like refs consistently screw this guy.
Yeah, hopefully if he's a starter this year, they'll give him a little more respect. I was really concerned about it. Looking at his per 36 fouls, it's not enough to foul out, though, so maybe we're overstating it a little bit.
Yeah.
But if he can stay on the floor, he's gonna form a great tandem with Whiteside, I think, and Nurk too when Nurk comes back.
Sure.
That was one thing I was really disappointed about last year, was the lack of Nurk and Collins playing together, I really wanted to see what that looked like defensively for a team that was clicking on offense. I thought throwing some lineups out there with those two would have helped our defense improve a little bit, but you didn't really see it much last year. So I always thought of Zach as the power forward of the future. I think he is quick enough laterally to cover the perimeter against stretch fours, and he can help on the backside too, quick enough. So I'm not worried about that. But last year, not playing with Nurk at all, it kind of got me worried a little bit that maybe Stotts doesn't think he could play power forward. But this year, he pretty much has no choice because we don't really have a power forward on the roster. So he's pretty much our power forward of right now. And like you said, I expect him to start. The thing is, with Zach, I feel like he plays better with better players around him. He's not a guy where you go into summer league and you're going to just feed him the ball every time and he's going to put up massive stats. So it might not look great on the stat lines, but I feel like he's going to contribute to ways that, like I said, just a simple rotation that isn't missed on the backside of a defense, and it doesn't show up in the box score, but it's the little things like that that help you win games. That's what like Draymond Green is so good at. When Andrew Bogut was there, he was also great at that. And if you can form a tandem like that plays off each other and knows where the other person is at all times and knows that the person behind you is going to make the right read, it's really hard to score on that.
For sure. I think one of the benefits of him playing power forward is he'll actually be able to utilize the potential in his low post and face-up game a little bit more because he will be going against a smaller defender. And looking at Zach during his media day interview, Zach has definitely bulked up. Now, I was skeptical about him reportedly adding 15 pounds of muscle, but I think that dude has definitely added 15 pounds of muscle. This dude is actually looking big now, and that has me excited. If he's going up against power forwards, a guy like Bojan Bogdanovic for the Utah Jazz, who's probably going to be their starting power forward. He's going to be able to abuse that guy in the low post, and I know some people will think that it'll be tough for him to post up playing alongside Hassan Whiteside because Hassan Whiteside can't space the floor, but if a guy helps off Hassan Whiteside, I'd like to think Zach Collins could throw the ball around the rim because that's all it takes to throw an alley-oop to Hassan Whiteside. 7 foot with a 7'7" standing reach, and he's not bad getting off the ground. Like, if you double off Whiteside, all Collins has to do is turn and just flip the ball over the defense around the rim, and Hassan Whiteside is going to throw it down. So I think that Collins will be able to post up, and I think that he'll be able to take care of some mismatch advantages. And in that starting lineup with Lillard, with McCollum, with Rodney Hood, and with the lob threat that is Hassan Whiteside, I think that it will actually create enough space for Zach Collins to take his time, make his move, and take advantage of guys in the low post.
Yeah, and then to add to that, if he can consistently knock down the three-pointer, get that up to at least 35 to 37%, that's going to be a great weapon to have because then he can either roll or pop out of the pick, and he can play off the ball in any position. You can, you have so many options. You can take him down low. You can keep him out in the corners. Like, there's nothing he wouldn't be able to do in that situation.
Yeah, and 35% would be improvement in line with his past couple years because he shot 31% from three his rookie year, 33% from three his second year. So if he keeps improving at the same rate, he'll shoot 35%. And he's talked about how he's been tightening up his mechanics, making his shot more consistent. So I do have optimism that he can shoot at least 35%. His efficiency actually improved a lot. From his rookie season going into his sophomore season, his true shooting percentage went up from 47 to 56%. So I'm actually not concerned about his offense at all as the starting power forward. He was an efficient player last season. I think he'll continue to improve. And I'm really excited to see what Collins has for us in his third year. So you got anything left on Big Z?
Let's move on to the last member of our starting lineup.
Yes, sir. That is Rodney Hood. Now, I know a lot of people will say, no, Kent Bazemore should start. Kent Bazemore will start, but I think it's probably going to be Rodney Hood. Rodney Hood took a pay cut to stay here. Rodney Hood played great next to Zach Collins, Damian Lillard, and CJ McCollum during the second round and the Western Conference Finals last playoffs. I think Rodney Hood is the type of small forward that works really well next to Dame and CJ because he's that third perimeter scoring threat that can help take the heat off those guys. When you have teams do what Denver did in the second round and take their small forward, who's a good defender, and put him on one of the backcourt and switch one of the smaller guards onto the small forward, which is Rodney Hood, then Rodney Hood can take that guy down to the low post and rise above them from 10 to 15 feet or get to the rim. Now, for Denver, their small forward was Torrey Craig. They put him on Dame. They moved Jamal Murray over and had him guard Rodney Hood. Rodney Hood absolutely abused that matchup. So it makes it a lot harder for teams to take a good defending small forward like a Paul George, like a Kawhi Leonard, and move him onto the backcourt when you have a guy like Rodney Hood who can go down in the low post, rise above guys, and make them pay for switching a small guy onto him. So I do think he's a good fit. I also think his defense will be fine. I think he's a good perimeter defender. He is a little bit skinny. He does have a little bit short arms, but I think he'll just be able to pressure up on the guy he's guarding. And if he gets beat, he has 2 elite rim protectors behind him. So I actually think his defensive fit is fine as well.
And in the playoffs last year, they kind of used him the same way they used Harkless all regular season.
Yeah.
And that's, like you were saying, they kind of switched him on to the point guard, so he was guarding Jamal Murray a lot of the time when he was in the game, and I didn't really notice too much of a difference or a drop off between him and Harkless. So everyone's worried about losing Harkless's defense, but I think Hood's going to fit right into that role. Maybe not 100% of what Mo did, but the difference between is going to be pretty minimal, and then add to that the difference in the offensive side of the ball. So you mentioned the post-ups, which we tried to get Mo involved with a lot of post-ups last year when he had the smaller defender on him, and he was actually improving on that, but Hood's at a whole nother level when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think that the most important thing that I still don't really know what he is on that end is his defensive ability, because we know the dude can score, we know the dude can take guys off the dribble, but he was always advertised as a poor defender. But last season, once he came over here, I actually thought he played really, really solid defense. Now, in Utah, he was the main scorer or the second scorer, so he expended a lot of energy on the offensive end. And then he got to Cleveland, and that was a bad situation for him. So I think this is the first time where he can kind of take a little bit of a backseat on the offensive end and focus more on defense. So hopefully he's able to do a good job on that end.
And so he's actually worse than CJ in efficiency numbers. So it's kind of weird, but his usage rate is a lot lower than I thought it would be over his career. So yeah, he doesn't have the ball quite in his hands as much. So and much like CJ, he doesn't turn the ball over a lot. So he's getting shots up at the rim. He was about 55% last year on his true shooting percentage, which we talked about with CJ is kind of average to mediocre. But in the playoffs, It was up near 60%. And if he does that this year, we're gonna be so good. Like I'm really excited to see if he can build off that playoff success. I think it's just a really good fit with those guards. He's not the focus on offense at all, and he's gonna slide in there and get looks that he hasn't gotten in a while. And I know he played with LeBron and Kyrie and all those guys, but I don't know. Those guys are just different. The offense isn't quite the same. I think it's more of a we're a great team, don't mess this up when you're playing with guys like that. But on this team, it's like, no, you're just as good as me. Like Dame like lets people know, like, if I pass you the ball, I want you to shoot. Like, that's fine. Like, don't worry about messing up. You'll get it next time, type of thing. And that really helps players get the best out of their abilities.
Yeah, he never really did look comfortable in Cleveland. I think that around the end of last season, then going into the playoffs, was the first time that he was actually comfortable while playing next to a superstar player, which was, of course, Dame. And then next to another legit all-star and CJ McCollum, I think that was the first time he was comfortable with being the third scoring option when he was on the court. And I think that is what he's best as, and his efficiency was a lot better for it. So now starting off with the bench, we're going to start with Rodney Hood's backup at the small forward position. That is Kent Bazemore, who we got in the miraculous Evan Turner trade. We thought we were going to have to dump a first-round pick along with Evan Turner's salary in order to get rid of ET, yet we traded ET straight up, and we got back a very serviceable player who I'm actually very excited for. So what are your thoughts on Bazemore going into this season?
So I think this is pretty comparable to the Hood situation last year, where not necessarily that he wasn't being used right in Atlanta, but they've been rebuilding the last couple of years. So he hasn't really fit in as well as he could have. I think he's a great role player on a good team. And it's not like the last couple of years where we've had decent role players in Harkless and Aminu, but they're having to be starters and be like the main like fourth and fifth options on the team. So he can just slide in and do his thing. And the reason why I think he is going to be coming off the bench instead of Hood, even though Hood can provide scoring, is I think with Simons being the de facto point guard on the second unit, it's going to be better to have Bazemore, because he's more of a point guard ball handler, small forward, than Hood, who's more of a scoring type. Like he doesn't really bring the ball up, even though he can handle the ball. So I think Bazemore, and then another player we'll get to, Hezonja, I think those guys will relieve some of the pressure of Simons if he's struggling to bring the ball up.
Yeah, I think the other reason it makes sense to bring Bazemore off the bench is when you look at our bench, we don't really have any standout defenders. You're looking at a rotation of like Simons, Hezonja, Tolliver, Gasol. I don't think any of those guys at this point in their career are noticeably above average. Meanwhile, in the starting lineup, you got two elite rim protectors in Collins and Whiteside. So from the defensive end, I think it makes sense to bring Bazemore off the bench, and that'll help against teams that decide to stagger stars like we used to do with Dame playing until the 3-minute mark, and then CJ subbing back into the game and playing with the bench unit. And it will help against a team like the Clippers, who have a legit sixth man in Lou Williams. Kent Bazemore will be able to guard guys like that and do a good job, and that'll help Simons out, because I think Simons can do a okay job on point guards or shooting guards. He has bulked up a little bit, so Simons would be able to kind of like be hidden depending on the matchups on the floor. So I do think Bazemore makes sense with the bench.
Yeah, with Bazemore, it's going to just depend on, hopefully last year was an outlier with his, I think it was down around 32% shooting threes.
Yeah, so didn't he have an injury to his shooting hand or something like that? I remember hearing something about some sort of injury that affected his shooting.
Yeah, hopefully that was the case. But yeah, if he's back more towards his career in the upper 30%, he's going to be a solid player. And he's one of those guys who can also take some pressure off of Dame by bringing the ball up and initiating the offense and stuff like that. So I think he's going to be a really good fit here. Much, much better than Turner was. Not that that's hard to do, but I just think, I still can't believe Atlanta did that trade. I don't know why. Like, I see pictures of Turner on Atlanta right now, and it, like, makes no sense to me. But
I was just...
Like, we didn't even have to give up. You'd think you'd have to give up at least a second or Trent or something in that situation, but I think
if you showed me pictures of all the guys that ended up leaving our team in their new destinations, and then you showed me the guys we got, including Nasir Little, I would have been wondering, like, how, like, what? I was thinking that when I was looking through pictures of like Myers in a Heat uniform, Jake Layman in a Timberwolf uniform, Mo Harkless in a Clippers uniform. You know, you had all these guys, Seth Curry gone, Enes Kanter gone, all these guys gone, yet somehow we got Kent Bazemore while keeping our first-round pick, and got Nasir Little, who somehow dropped to 25, and somehow we got Whiteside without giving up a pick either. Like, Olshey had a really good summer, and Kent Bazemore, that trade was a very, very good trade. I don't know how we swapped Evan Turner straight up for Kent Bazemore, but it is a good trade, and I think Kent Bazemore will benefit from being here. I think his shot opportunities will be a lot more quality than he had in Atlanta, which was a struggling team the past couple of seasons. So I do think I do think his 3-point percentage will rise from having better 3-point opportunities. He just needs to shoot around 35-36% and he'll be completely fine. And I actually have optimism for him to shoot that, and I never had optimism for Evan Turner to shoot even 30%. So it's a huge breath of fresh air.
Yeah, it's quite a difference when you're going from don't ever shoot a three, what are you thinking, to like oh man, if he shoots 35%, we're solid.
Man,
yeah,
Evan Turner's shot was just his form, man. I don't understand. It was so he looked like a T-Rex shooting the ball. No offense, I'm not trying to hate on ET, but his form was very, very strange.
At least in the playoffs, he stopped shooting them for the most part. And
yeah, exactly. If you can't shoot and you can do other things, do the other things. Why are you trying to shoot fade away behind the back, spinning mid-range jumpers that are contested? I never understood that.
Like Ben Simmons, he does need to develop a 3-point shot or at least some sort of jumper, but I respect the fact that he won't shoot them. He's not gonna if he's gonna shoot 15%, what's the point?
He plays to his strengths instead of playing to his weaknesses, and I think as a role player in the NBA, that's what you got to do.
But in Stott's offense, it's designed around those guys having to shoot the three, so it's so hard when you have a guy who can't do it. So that's why I think having guys like Hood and Bazemore on the outside, and like we talked about with Collins, if he can shoot at a high clip, that's going to fit right in, and I think the offense is going to be even better than last year, which was really good.
Now we move on to our next bench player, and that is the young gun, who's possibly the most intriguing player on the roster this season. That is, of course, Anfernee Simons. Eric, take it away.
Man, the hype train is completely off the rails at this point.
Oh, it's derailed. It's been derailed. It's off a cliff.
I don't recall a Blazer being hyped this much in the offseason. You always hear stuff about, so-and-so improved, so-and-so's killing it in practice, so-and-so put on 15 pounds, whatever. But I can't recall the last time you heard comments like, this could be the best young guard in the league. This is the most gifted player I've ever drafted, the stuff that Olshey was saying yesterday.
Oh, man.
Like we talked about earlier, it's kind of I'll believe it when I see it. I mean, I'm hoping everyone's right. But everyone's saying it. All the players are saying, he's the best player in practice. I have to go back to, Jermaine O'Neal. You always heard that about him on those good Blazer teams.
The other guy could be Martell Webster. He would always, every now and then, and probably a couple years, had a little bit of hype around him where people were saying, this dude's going to be a beast and live up to his draft stock. And he never did. Hopefully it's not like Martell Webster. Hopefully he lives up to the hype because he could be really good.
Yeah. And you just got to wonder how much of an opportunity he'll get this year, having Damon CJ in front of him and not being big enough to play small forward. It's going to be interesting to see how that all works out. But, man, if he lives up to even half the hype, it's going to be fun to watch because he has all the tools and he does have a game similar to Dame's. If he could actually use his athleticism, he's probably a little more explosive than Dame could be, and that would he could learn to attack the rim. The main thing with him, though, is he's going to have to be the backup point guard by default this year. I know he's got some guys in the second unit that'll help him out in that regard, but he's going to have to show that he can run the offense too and not just be a scorer. Because if he is just a scorer, he's more suited to play shooting guard, in my opinion, than be the backup point guard. But man, I'm excited to see what he can do. If he gives us anything this year, it's going to be really, really great to watch.
Yeah, and I mean, He has all the question marks a young, unproven player has, He's a guy who has scoring potential, but just how applicable is that to a consistent NBA level? Can he do what he did that last game of the regular season consistently over an entire season? Now, I'm not saying drop 37 points, but
Right.
he did play 48 minutes. That's probably like a 20 to 25 point game if he plays about 20 minutes per game, 25 minutes per game, something like that, which will probably be his role this season. So can he do that on a consistent basis where he's able to light up the other team like that? We'll have to wait and see on that one. But the kid has a ton of potential. I mean, you said that he's probably more explosive than Dame, and yeah, I never saw Dame dunking after a practice and getting his eyes above the rim. Anfernee wasn't just getting his head above the rim, he was getting his eyes above the rim. When you combine that with his ability to handle the ball, with his quickness, with his shot-making ability, he's creative, he can finish really well, then you have a guy that could be an explosive sixth man of the year candidate, hopefully as soon as next season, because he'll definitely get that opportunity. And as you said, Olshey has been raving about this guy, his teammates have been raving about him, so hopefully he can put it together and have a breakout sophomore season.
I just wanted to interject that little sidestep three-pointer that he was adding during Summer League. That's nice.
Oh, dude. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a Dame shot, too. It's kind of cool to see him start pulling out moves that you can tell he worked on by watching Dame and CJ do them, and then Anfernee was pictured training with Dame this past offseason, so I'm sure Dame was working on him with a couple of Dame's moves. So it's kind of cool to see a young guy come in the league and pick that up right away, because Dame and CJ, they got so many moves, they got the total scoring package. Anfernee has the feel and the ability and the potential to be the same exact way, so I like seeing him pull some of Dame's and CJ's tricks out of his own bag. So moving on to our next player, and it's on the other side of the coin. It's the oldest player on our team. It's the veteran. It's the future Hall of Famer, Pau Gasol. And I was very excited for us to pick up Gasol because he's a future Hall of Famer, has a lot of pedigree in this league, and he's a perfect guy to back up Whiteside playing about 12 to 15 minutes per game because he can still play, and I'll get into that. But first and foremost, we haven't had a big man coach for the past few years, and now we have one who's basically still a player, and that's Pau Gasol. He's going to be a great mentor for guys like Zach Collins, Skal Labissiere, and other bigs. I know Nurk has been picking his brain a little bit, and I think this is the perfect veteran to bring in and mentor some of our young bigs.
Man, you just see professional when you listen to him talk and watch him on the court. Yeah, he said all the right things in the media day. You love that he's already taken Skal and Collins under his wing and trying to teach him the tricks of the trade. And I'm just excited to have a vet presence. It seems like the last few years, Olshey has wanted to keep that average age down a little bit, so It looks a little like we're more of a younger team than we are. And because of that, we haven't really had that veteran influence. I think like Gerald Henderson was probably the last kind of solid vet that we had in the locker room. And I'm just excited to see how Pau can mentor some of those guys. And I think last year, as long as he's healthy, he's like last year wasn't really his true self if he was really hurting that bad. So obviously it's just going to come down to if his ankle's okay. Because if it is, he actually put up decent numbers the year before on the Spurs and was still a capable player. He's not like game changing or anything at this point in his career, but he can give you, like you said, a solid backup minutes at the center. And if not, I think he'll be fine, kind of taking just a leadership role. And if he doesn't have a huge role on this team at times, I don't think he's the kind of guy who will cause a disruption either at this point in his career, at least.
Yeah, nah, he'll be fine in the locker room, even if it ends up at the end of the season him being a third big as insurance who doesn't play unless Nurkic or Whiteside has some sort of issues, or maybe Whiteside gets traded and Pau is able to remain the backup center once Nurkic gets back. We'll see how that plays out, but there's 3 reasons, in my opinion, Pau is still a very solid bench player. 1, he can shoot. He's become a near 40% three-point shooter. I'm not looking at his stats right now, but I know he's right around there. The second is he's become a very, very good passing big man, and that's just his basketball IQ. He's been in the league so long, he's able to predict passes becoming available before they happen. He has good vision. He's able to place his passes on the money. He's a lot like Nurkic in terms of his passing. And then the third one is he's not athletic anymore. Definitely not athletic, but he does know where to be on the defensive end as a rim protector. He just can't get off the floor to block a bunch of shots, but in terms of bothering guys attacking the rim, Pau's able to get over enough to make shots a little bit more difficult, despite the fact that Pau doesn't play all that fast. He doesn't rotate all that fast. He's just able to see plays developing, so he's able to kind of get a little bit of a head start compared to your average big trying to protect the rim.
And if that kind of rubs off on some of our younger bigs, say Zach learns better positioning so he's not getting as many fouls and stuff like that, that's going to be huge for the development of those guys.
100%. So moving on, we got Pau Gasol's countryman, and that is Mario Hezonja. Now, I've been outspoken about Mario Hezonja, and I know that I'll get a lot of heat if Mario Hezonja breaks out and ends up being a really good player. But consider this. I never said Mario Hezonja won't break out. All I said is, for a team trying to contend, I don't like having to gamble on the fact that Hezonja will break out. And it looks like Hezonja will play a part in this rotation, and he's a guy who could potentially be really good. I'll give him that. But if he plays like he has so far in his career, he'll be very, very bad, and he'll be a guy that will hurt us when he's on the floor. And all I've said on Hezonja is I don't like gambling on that much of a wild card off our bench. I know some people will say, oh, what about Simons? Simons hasn't had a chance yet to prove that he's a bad player. Hezonja has had multiple chances. I know it's been bad situations, but he's had multiple chances and he hasn't performed in them. So based on what I've seen so far from Hezonja, it's hard to get all that excited for him. So I never said that he won't break out. For me, it's just hard. It's hard for me to be willing to take that gamble on him.
Yeah, it's tough because he hasn't played on a team like this before either. So you wonder if he fits in a role and has less pressure on him to live up to that number 5 pick in the draft status, if he can kind of be a lot more comfortable, kind of like what we talked about with Hood.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I can see why people think he'll break out. The situation could help him. I can see the reasoning. I'm not even, arguing with the reasoning that he could break out. Some people said he's been good before in his career. I disagree with that, but I do definitely see why some people are excited for him.
Well, he's had some good games. I wouldn't say he's been good in his career, but especially at the end of last year when New York kind of played him in a point forward role and he had the ball in his hands, he performed pretty well. So it gets you kind of excited to think, oh, maybe we have something here in a point forward.
Yeah.
Like we talked about taking pressure off the second unit for ball handling if he can just grab the rebound and go down the floor. But I think in Stott's offense, it's going to come down to whether he makes his three-point shots too,
for
like
sure.
Everyone else.
For sure.
And,
I mean, the flips. Let me just get this in. The flip side of the argument that he can be a point forward type of player, based on the 3 games he had last season, is 2 of those games were against horrible teams fielding G League rosters. He did have a good game against Houston, and they were fielding a good roster. But there was really only 1 game where he's had a good game as a point forward that was actually against a legit NBA team. So I think that hype is a little bit premature in my opinion. But I'll let you finish the thought that you had.
Well, if it wasn't for Simons, he would have been probably the most hyped player yesterday in the media day. So it just seems like he's going to make the offense a little quicker. And I know every team talks about that at media day, how they're going to play faster this year. Every coach says that's the change they wants to make, is to run the offense quicker. And it was another one of those believe it when I see it things, because I've been wanting that for years with this team. They've had like a young athletic roster, and they didn't do that. So I find it hard to believe that they'll do it now that those players are getting a little older. But with the second unit, if you got guys like Bazemore, Simons, and Hezonja who can all just grab the ball and go fast, I think that's going to be kind of a sneaky good second unit. And he definitely has to improve his shooting. It's just the only thing that his shot looks good. I mean, I like his mechanics and all that. It just hasn't translated. It's like when we had Tolliver back in the day, his shot like always looked like it was going in, but it never went in. Like, so hopefully he can get over that, because he's going to get really good looks on this team. But yeah, I mean, I kind of look at it as a low risk, high reward type situation, because I mean, he just signed for the minimum, so it's not like we wasted our mid-level exception on him or something. So
yeah,
I think he's going to be fine. If he struggles, I think we'll go a little smaller in the second unit with Simons and Bazemore, and then either Dame or CJ will integrate into that. But I think the plan right now is to just have Simons, Bazemore, and Hezonja at the 1 through 3 in that second unit and see how that works out.
Yeah, if Hezonja doesn't end up panning out, it could lead to more minutes for this next guy, and that is Anfernee Tolliver. Anfernee Tolliver, there's not a whole lot to speak on. He's a good three-point shooter, an average defender, and doesn't really do anything else. He's a good veteran guy to have in the locker room, a really good guy, but he's just kind of I wouldn't even call him a 3-and-D guy, because his defense isn't good enough. He's just kind of a three-point shooter that can play some okay defense, and he can be brought in if Portland wants to stretch the floor a little bit more, or if there's an injury, he can be a guy that kind of fits in and plays his role and doesn't really hurt the team, and provides some good shooting next to Dame and CJ, provides them with a forward that can knock down shots. But other than that, not much excites me about Anfernee Tolliver.
Yeah, I just kind of hope that he can kind of give us what Curry gave us last year. If he can shoot up above 40% from three. It was a little down last year, but once again, career-wise, he's been a lot higher than that. So, yeah, if he gives us some knockdown threes and he's automatic from out there, it's going to be a nice weapon to have off the bench, but I don't see him having a huge role except for in situations where we are like down and we need some 3-point shooting, like in the fourth quarter, or just situationally where we need a quick three or something.
Yeah, honestly, he's probably my third choice out of Hezonja, Labissiere, and him in Tolliver. My first choice would have to be Skal Labissiere, because I believe Skal has a lot of talent. And unlike Hezonja, Skal has actually had a good NBA season. His rookie season, he shot over 37% from three. He was playing for a bad Sacramento team, but he had a really good rookie season. And then he kind of declined, but I don't think that's due to Skal. I think it was more due to Sacramento started bringing in a lot of big men, and Skal's opportunity dwindled when he probably should have been given a consistent opportunity his second and third season based on what he showed during his rookie year. I think he has a ton of talent, and I really hope he shows it this year.
Man, he's got all the tools and athleticism. Like, he check marks all the boxes that you want out of a big man. So it's just a matter of will he be consistent, and I hope that he gets minutes to kind of see what he does. Much like I think they're going to force feed Simons minutes. I'm hoping that's what they do with Skal, but I have a feeling that they're going to go. Stotts is going to lean more towards the veterans, but it's weird because during last season, after Nurk went down, I heard Stotts after a game say, like, I've been trying to get Skal more minutes. He's earned it. Like, I want to see what he can do. But then he never really did until the last game, which obviously didn't really matter.
Yeah.
So I think Stotts was leaning towards trying to give him more of a role, but it's hard to fit him in when you have those vets that probably, when you're trying to win and trying to compete in the West, it's hard to just give guys developmental minutes unless they're performing in those minutes.
Yeah.
So it's going to come down to whether or not he comes in and starts right away having good games, because if he doesn't, he could find his way out of the rotation pretty quickly, I think.
Yeah, but I don't know, man. I really hope he gets that chance, because when I look at Skal Labissiere, he has the potential to be good at pretty much everything. From his ball handling, like I've seen clips of him handling the ball. I know it's just like workout video stuff like that, but he can actually handle the ball pretty well for a guy his size. When you look at his shooting, I mean, like, he can shoot mid-range and he can shoot from three. He showed it his rookie season, shooting 37% from three. He had that amazing step back. Yep, in that final game of the season against Sacramento. So he can catch and shoot. He can shoot facing up out of the post, and he has the potential to be able to shoot off the dribble, which is rare for a big man. A big man shooting that step back three is very, very impressive. He has the potential to be a good rebounder. He's lengthy. He's athletic. I think it's just about him being a little bit stronger going after boards with a little bit more tenacity. And he has the potential to be a good defender because, as I said, he's athletic. He can get off the ground quick. He can move his feet quick. He just has a tool package that's just like, if we could just get him maximizing his potential in all areas of the game, he could be so, so good.
I have a feeling, so what's going to happen is early on he's going to get a chance, and if he plays well, he'll probably get a second chance then in the second half. If he kind of struggles in a game, you might see Tolliver instead, or situationally, if we're losing, you might see Tolliver instead of Skal in the first half. So I'm hoping this year. It seemed like the last couple of years we haven't had a lot of blowout wins, so it's like every game has to be heartache and like down to the wire. But if we can get some big leads, it would help ease that to where we can give some developmental minutes despite being a really good team.
Yeah.
But like I talked about, it's so hard when you're fighting for every win, trying to get seeding, home court advantage, all that stuff in the playoffs. It's hard to just I'm not saying that's the right move, because I think the right move is always to be the best team you can be heading into the playoffs, regardless of seed. But you don't necessarily want to sacrifice wins if it's not helping either.
Yeah, I look at him and then I look at Tolliver, and if Tolliver isn't out shooting Skal Labissiere, it makes absolutely no sense to play Tolliver over Labissiere, because every other facet of the game, Skal is better in my opinion. The only thing Tolliver has on Labissiere is his three-point shooting, and then I also guess he's a veteran guy, so maybe he can play a little bit smarter, but when the guy doesn't have the ball that much, is it really that applicable since he doesn't have a huge role? Tolliver's going to have to outshoot Skal to outplay him, in my opinion. And I think that Stotts will handle this well, and I think he'll give Skal a chance at some point, and I don't think Tolliver's going to play if he's not outshooting Labissiere. It just makes no sense. Maybe you disagree with that, but it's just hard to do it.
I personally agree with that, but I don't necessarily think Stotts sees it that way. He's more of a when he's had veterans, and I think that's another reason why Olshey hasn't had a lot of veterans on this team, is because Stotts kind of leans on those guys instead of developing the younger guys when he's had those guys on the roster. And I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad thing, but the good thing about Skal is he could also slide over and play some five. So if Gasol can only give you like 8 to 10 minutes a game instead of 12 to 15.
Yeah.
Or he's kind of slow coming back from that foot injury. I think Skal will be fine as the backup 5 as well, so he can get some minutes there, whereas Tolliver is only about like 6'9", so he kind of struggled playing that backup center spot.
Yeah,
but
then when you look
I do agree with you that they're gonna be fighting for time, and if Tolliver's not hitting threes, then there's no real reason to play him.
Yeah, I mean, he could get some backup center minutes, but then also when you look at Zach Collins being a starting power forward and his foul issues, Zach Collins could easily get into foul trouble, and Stotts might not want to mess with the rotation. And if Labissiere isn't getting normal rotation minutes, I could definitely see him inserting Labissiere early in the game if Zach gets into foul trouble to keep the rest of the rotation the same, because that's something Stotts has been known to do in the past as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So moving on, we got 2 young guys left. The first one we're going to start with is second-year guard Gary Trent Jr., who didn't really show me anything his rookie year. He had some flashes in Summer League, but it's still not the style of play that I want Gary Trent Jr. to be playing. We know he can shoot the ball. We know he can hit mid-range shots. We know he can get to the rim a little bit. But he seems to be a little bit of a black hole in my opinion. There's multiple times where I've watched him and just like, this guy reminds me of a worse version of CJ. Like, CJ is known to take a contested jumper over passing to an open teammate, but CJ is such a ridiculously good scorer, he can kind of get away with it. Meanwhile, Gary Trent Jr., he just doesn't seem like he's a good enough shooter, a good enough scorer to justify how aggressive he is with the ball in his hands, because last season, in little bits of stretches that he got, he forced a ton of shots, and I could have understood it if it was like, okay, he gets 2 minutes of garbage time, he wants to try and get his, like, that's fine. But going into Summer League, he had a roster spot. He wasn't playing for a roster spot. I wanted to see him improve the way he played and try to get other guys involved a little bit more, and especially when Anfernee Simons was hot for 1 or 2 games, I wanted to see Gary Trent do what CJ does when Dame is hot and just kind of like try and set up Simons and try and let Simons continue his hot streak and continue to get shots because he's knocking them down. And I just didn't really see that.
Yeah, so Trent, I think the only path for him to get minutes this year is if he's just shooting the 3 lights out. And if he's not, which he hasn't in the NBA yet, he was a great 3-point shooter in college. In his G League stint last year, he shot incredible. But until that translates to the NBA, I think he's going to be on the outside of the rotation. I'm hoping someday that he learns that in order to crack the rotation, he needs to do what you said and become a more complete player, less centric on getting his shots versus working within the offense. But yeah, there's some times where he just shoots the ball and you're like, dude, come on. like just pass the ball. And it was like that in that last game of the season too, where you had Simons going off, like you said, in Summer League, and Skal was on fire, and Trent played that whole game too, but no one ever talks about him. But yeah, it's like those guys are going off. Like, get them the ball.
Yeah.
Don't take a contested shot when you have a guy that's hit like 3 3-pointers in a row, you know?
Yeah, and I think the thing with our coaching staff is they're good at giving young players a lot of confidence. The thing is with Gary Trent Jr., man, that dude is extremely, extremely confident. They almost need to rein it in a little bit and take a different approach towards Gary Trent than they have towards guys like Dame, guys like Anfernee, guys like CJ, because they need to be in his ear trying to get him to play a little bit more unselfishly and play the right style of basketball.
I'm hoping he still can carve out a role in the NBA as a scorer off the bench.
Yeah.
And it's just going to come down to, like I said, he's got to, if he gets an opportunity this year, he's got to make his 3-point shots, because if those aren't going in, it's kind of like Tolliver. It's like, what's the point of playing at this point?
Because the other thing that could really help him is being a good defender, but I haven't seen anything that says he's a good defender. I still haven't really figured out what I think of Gary Trent Jr. on that end of the ball. But his potential was a 3-and-D guy, but he also hasn't really shown me enough to be 100% confident have 100% confidence in him fully. I'm messing up my words here, man. I haven't had Gary Trent Jr. show me anything that makes me have 100% confidence in him actually becoming a 3-and-D player. So moving on to our last player, that is the rookie. That is Nasir Little, taken with the 25th pick in last year's draft. He was a guy who was a top 5 prospect coming out of high school, going to North Carolina University. He was a one-and-done prospect, and his draft stock fell all the way down to the late lottery, and then once drafts rolled around, he actually fell all the way down to 25, and he became the steal of the draft. Now, if you guys were watching us on our draft live stream, we were ecstatic to get Nasir Little. We were shocked that we were able to get a prospect of this caliber that late in the draft. However, the excitement surrounding Little was tempered a little bit as he didn't really show much in Summer League, but I chalk that up to him still being a raw prospect. He's definitely a project. He's definitely a guy who's an exciting prospect because of his long-term upside, but also he's not a guy who's going to do well in Summer League because he's a guy who moves off the ball, plays defense. There's still questions about him being able to knock down an open shot, but I feel like he's one of those prospects that will look better if he's playing next to better players.
Yeah, I don't expect him to get any minutes this year except for garbage time. We can dress 13 now a game, so he'll probably dress as long as Nurk's on the shelf. So unless there's another injury to a wing player, he probably has no chance at making the rotation. But yeah, he's going to have to earn it defensively probably in the beginning of his career. But I kind of see his path as one of those where you hope by the third year he has that big jump. Simons this year is looking like he's going to skip that and do it in the second year, hopefully.
Yeah.
But for the most part, the wings and guards on this roster, other than Dame, of course, it's been into that third year before you really see what they can do and the improvements they've made since college. So I think we should just be patient and give him a couple years. Like we said, it was kind of a roller coaster this summer between being so happy with his draft and then him kind of not really showing much in Summer League. I kind of think he should have the ball more in his hands.
In Summer League, yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's some playmaking potential there. It's kind of fun to have a nice wing prospect that we haven't really had in a while. We've had the guard prospects and the big man prospects, but we haven't really had like an athletic type that could become like a shutdown defender if he pans out.
For sure, because the wings that Olshey has drafted in the past are guys like Will Barton, who was kind of like a wiry athletic guard who was kind of a slasher, definitely not a defensive first prospect at the time he came out of the draft because he was super skinny. And then there was Alan Crabb, who was a scorer at Cal when he was in college, and Crabb wasn't known as a defender either. He was known as a shooter. So this is the first pick of Neil Olshey's tenure here in Portland that was a guy that was a defensive first wing. So it'll be really interesting to see how Terry Stotts and this coaching staff develops a player like this because they've never really had a prospect like this.
Yeah, I'm hoping he can just eat up all the practice time and learn, and you hope this environment will foster that. But yeah, I'm still really high on him. I know a lot of people are down on him right now, but I'm not expecting anything from this year, but I still think it's a move that in the future is going to pan out.
For sure. The most interesting thing to me in regards to Little is if Portland does have some problems, has some injury issues, and they need a wing to step up into the rotation, are they going to play Gary Trent Jr. or Nasir Little first?
I think at first Trent will get the first shot at that, unless it's like both Hood and Bazemore, and we need a little more size maybe.
Yeah.
But I think Trent will get the first shot just because he's been in the system already for a year. So yeah, I don't expect Little to have really much of a path to get that opportunity. But I'm hoping if he does that he isn't horrible in that situation. We're probably not in a very good spot if it comes down to that this year.
Yeah.
So I think we'd probably be screwed either way if it comes down to that.
I mean,
So,
just as long as Dame and CJ don't get hurt, we got a chance. You could have Skal, Tolliver, and Nasir Little next to Dame and CJ, and I still feel like we would have a chance in pretty much any game just because those two are so fantastic. But yeah, I hope that it doesn't come to the point where we have to rely on Nasir Little. We need to give him time to develop because he's definitely 2 years away from being 2 years away, as they would say, for Bruno Caboclo.
And I think one of the reasons why, at least at this point, they're keeping that 15th roster spot open is because you can't plan on injuries. So if, like, let's say guards, like a guard went down, you could pick up a guard then. If center goes down, you could pick up an extra big. If a wing goes down, you could pick up a wing either from a trade or through free agency or whatever. So I think they're kind of bracing themselves to be flexible enough to cover that if that happens. Obviously, a pickup off the street isn't going to be ideal in that situation, but I think they're kind of holding that roster spot open to give us a little bit more depth if we need it, depending on how things pan out.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense for that reason, or they're hoping that a guy like Moses Brown or one of these training camp invitees comes in and lights the world on fire, and they have to give him the spot. We'll talk more about some of those training camp guys once the preseason actually gets underway and after we see them a little bit, and we can actually base our assessment of them after seeing them, because the only guy I've really seen play a lot recently is Moses Brown because he was in college last year. Parentes was a star guard at Virginia a few years ago. Troy Copain was a star guard at Cincinnati a few years ago, but I haven't seen either of those guys play in the past 2-3 years. So it'll be definitely interesting to see if one of those three can take the roster spot, or if that Blevins guy can maybe show us a little something. I don't really know much about him. I think he's related to Dame or something like that. But I think he was on our summer league roster too, but didn't really play at all either.
He was, yeah.
Did he play much?
I think he played maybe 20-some minutes or something.
Yeah.
I thought I read yesterday when they signed him.
So I think that was more of a favor to Dame. I think that was a favor to Dame.
Yeah, we just warm body for practice during training camp because we didn't have the full 20 yet. But we do have one two-way contract open too.
Oh, so Jalen Horde too. Yeah.
Yeah, those three guys that you mentioned are fighting for that one. I mean, I guess we could possibly keep two of them. One could have the roster spot and one could have the two-way. But I think what's going to happen is whichever one of those three performs the best will get the second two-way contract. And then that's the other part about leaving that roster spot open is 2 years ago when we had Wade Baldwin on a two-way contract, we actually signed him outright when his 45 days were up, and that way he could become playoff eligible. And I mean, that didn't really work out, I guess, but
yeah.
You want to have that option available sometimes in case a guy like Horde or if it's Brown, those guys blow up in G League, and you're like, okay, we need to have this guy on the roster. Then you can just sign him and have his rights for next year and all that stuff. But yeah, it's all developmental at this point. None of those guys are gonna play on the team this year except for in extreme blowouts.
Yep. 100% agree. So with that, that's a wrap for our 2019-2020 Blazers roster player breakdown. We dove into some of the things we heard about Media Day, and hopefully you guys agree with some of our insights on these players. If you disagree, I'm sure you guys will let us know in the comment section below, and that's completely fine. Just be nice to us. We're working here. We're getting out this content. So anyway, that's a wrap for me and Eric. We'll see you guys later. This has been Tori. Peace out. Go Blazers. I don't know why I said that. It was so weird, but screw it.